Hello,
Okay.
everyone.
Hello, everyone. So we're Chloe and Beatrice. So we're students in Master Media Design. And for the last talk of the Distortion Series, that festival that happened yesterday and today, we're glad to present you Reka and Divine from the 100 Rabbit Studio, a digital studio about the sailboat. So hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. So let's start. In order to know you better, we read that your name is inspired by the anime Ergo Proxy. So why did you choose it after this name?
It's a good question. Well, so before we started sailing, we were going through the process of watching the anime, which I mean, we don't think it's that good, but there's this one moment in the anime when they're just becalmed in a sort of like a desert, and they are really bored, and the whole episode is about boredom. And at the time in our life, we had just moved back from living in Japan, and we wanted to have more of these sort of liminal space or exploring moments between moments kind of thing, and the sailboat seemed like such a good vessel to do that. So it seemed like a good name to sort of like remind us of why we're doing this.
I see. And how does the life look like on Pino? So who is Pino actually? Because we know, but the people who are watching probably know.
Well, Pino is one of the characters in the anime. It's like a small android sailor, I guess, or like someone who travels with the main characters on the sailboat.
Yeah, and it's just a good short name, because the boat's name before was much more complicated. So on the radio, if you want to, you have to spell out the name, and a 4-letter name is better than the 8 or so name that we had before. It's just simplicity. And Pinot is short for Pinocchio, which is also kind of nice.
Nice.
And it translates really well to Japanese also, and our goal was to go there. So we wanted to have a name that we would be able to, actually spell with katakana and hiragana.
Nice. Yeah. So, and where are you right now?
Right now we're in Victoria. Victoria is in British Columbia. It's like on an island just off the coast of Vancouver. Yeah, like on that picture.
It's on the very southern tip of the island, which is really weird because we're closer to the US than we are to Canada right now. It's kind of below the, if you look at the where the country is separated, it's like we're more into the US.
Yeah, like we get American radio, the American Coast Guard, like cell phone reception is all like American services. It's the most it's probably one of the most southernest place of the Western Canada.
Well, I mean, it looks cold. Well, it sounds cold.
It's the warmest place in Canada, so.
Oh, then okay. I mean. So in one of your talk, you said that you were like migratory birds, that you had learned how to fight the weather. So tell us about how you learn to read the sky and how to live while being surrounded by no one.
I think that's just by spending time in it and just kind of observing and then just seeing what happens. And I think it's just by experiencing it yourself, and and just recognizing the cloud shapes. And
well, we don't fight the weather. Like one thing that the migratory birds do, they follow the weather. They go where the weather takes them, and that seems like the natural way of living around us. And it's the moment when you start fighting the weather and going against, like, you're up in dangerous situation, especially on a boat. Like, the idea is that when it's calm, you just get like save your energies for when the weather hits. Like when you cross the ocean, you're surrounded by birds who are just in the water, just like saving energy until the wind comes back. And that's kind of what we decide to do, is to follow these patterns and live according to nature.
And there's birds that spend their entire lives at sea. They just go back to shore, like just for a month or two a year, and the rest of the time they're just out there. So I guess we're kind of like that in a way, especially when we do long passages.
Yeah, we missed most of COVID because we were at sea.
You're lucky.
True. Yeah, you're lucky. I think you live it in a really different way. And I mean, personally, I found it this life really scared. In fact, I want to ask you if you never be scared or in danger somehow.
Yeah, all the time.
Oh.
But it's you're afraid of different things. Like in the city, you're everybody is afraid all the time. But it's just different fears when you're on the ocean. Like you're afraid of like bigger things than your neighbor who might be a psycho or.
Exactly. And did you have some story to share with us, or prefer to don't talk about it?
Well, it's. I don't think it would be like a good way to start off talking about sailing by just
true. This is
like when we started sailing, everyone was always telling us the worst stories. Like you tell your family that you want to go sailing, and they're like, "Oh, I read this horrible book where everybody dies, and you have to read this." So you set off with all these stories of catastrophes, and you don't really understand why they happened. So you just think it's like objectively dangerous, and so usually we just, I mean, the scary story. We survived them and made us stronger, but it's not like what we use to broadcast the idea that sailing is actually like an interesting way of living.
But I mean, it's mostly pleasant too. Like it's like we encounter more good and calm weather than we do bad weather. So
yeah,
I see. And I mean, this living this life on the boat now. Speaking about your project that we are seeing in this video looping, could you share like with us how the living off the grids has impact the type of project that you do, or the process?
Well, we used to make iOS apps before, and we left Canada armed with 2 power hungry laptops, and we were still using all this really bloated hardware, and well, not hardware but software, and it was really hard to, once we started to anchor out more, we realized we couldn't keep up with the energy that our hardware was using. So we had to simplify our projects considerably, and not simplifying them, but also just depending on where we are, like the first project that we did that we completed on the boat was a book, just because it was more realistic to work on that. That was the book 1,000 Rooms. And we did that in the French Polynesia, because we had no access to power, and the internet was dreadfully slow and expensive.
Yeah, so I can imagine.
Yeah, that was the only thing that we could manage then. But I think that was probably for the best. We just started to do different things.
Yeah, we left off thinking that we were gonna do like more increasingly more intricate iOS applications and tools and video games, but then we realized that all this technology that we have when we live in the city starts to fail and degrade as you go offshore. Like we started sailing, and then like all the devices, like Rika said, use too much power to be sustainable on the boat, so we just had them off. All the software that we were using was just too costly to use, so we were using them. Eventually, we just had nothing left, basically. And we were like, well, is all of tech trash? Like for like a world where you don't have seemingly infinite amount of power. And it took us a while to find like a space in technology that we could use that still works a little bit like off the grid, but there's so few of that stuff that is used nowadays. Like most of what we do is targeting hardware from the 90s, because it seemed like that was the last breath of tech that was repairable or open source or low power. So
yeah, this we are gonna go deeper with Chloe's question later, but now you mentioned the internet issues. So actually, I was pretty interested. I was like, how they manage to work. In fact, like I was asking myself, do you adapt the actual sailing trajectory on like based on the project that you're making, just to be closer to the city, for example, to have better connection?
Yes and no. I think there's one island I remember we went to because we knew that they had internet, and we ended up staying there for like a month, I think, and that's the only time we could ever just get everything done.
Wahine?
Yeah, so I think that time was the only time we ever shot specifically for a place to have a connection.
Where are you looking for? Wi-Fi.
Yeah, there was like a hotel nearby, so we could we were close enough to the shore that we had a pretty good connection. But other times, not too much. I think you always find something, or you just prepare so that you don't need it. Like you get, if we have to do research or something, then we just gather all the documents or download websites that work offline. And
The last sailing trip we did, we spent 7 weeks without internet.
Wow.
When was
It's
the last time
impossible.
Yeah, I know but honestly, you stop thinking about it after 4 days. You kind of like start to wonder why you ever even gave a shit about any of it.
I mean, it's pretty inspiring, and you keep the core. This is really like, yeah, it's inspiring for me. I'm gonna try to don't use 4 days for 4 days.
But it's impossible to do that in the city, I think.
Yeah, right.
Like you need I mean, if you don't have a cell phone in the city, it's complicated because you needed to do everything. You go to a restaurant or something, you want to check the menu, you need your cell phone because now all the menus are not printed anymore.
Yeah, it's like QR code stuff.
It's like, oh, now you need to have all this technology, otherwise everything breaks around you.
Yeah, this is right. You need to be forced, kind of. So speaking about open source, I leave the talk with
yes,
we're
going to go a little deeper into what you do, really. So you've created an entire system of tools that you use every day, like Orca or Left. And we wondered, what are the guiding principles that you apply when you create a new tool? And like, what are the guiding principles to create a new tool?
Offline first.
Yeah, offline first. You know, like you go to a conference now and all the startups, they show up and give you their business cards, and if you ask them, like, does your service works offline? And 99% of them will say no. Nobody's building things today that are designed explicitly to be accessible offline. That means that all of 99% of everything that is being developed today we can't use. Like we go to conferences and everyone is showing up with products or tools or whatever, and none of it we can use. So we decided there might be some people like us interested in having tools that just don't break when they go away from the Wi-Fi. And so like maybe that could be one of the guiding principles. Like always working offline, always open source entirely, so people can fix them while we're away. Like sometimes we release something and there's a bug or something, and we don't, since we have so little internet and so big stretch of time spans between the moments when we are online, that people have to be able to fix their own problem if we're not there. If we shut down the studio, we don't want all of the stuff that we built to just start breaking down. Like for us, being open source and also working offline, that sort of stuff, it's very important.
And it's also longevity too, which is to make sure that it can easily be on older hardware and there's no blocker. Dude, that's kind of a big thing. Just, we know many people that, work on their games, and, we ask them, you think in 5 years people will still be able to play your games? And they'll say, no, not really.
Yeah, PlayStation 5 might shut down their servers in 5 years, and everything that's being built today will stop working.
Yeah. And do you have new tools that you want to create, new ones in mind? If you can share this, maybe it's like not yet or a secret, but what would you like to work on next?
Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we want to build yet, but we want to keep finding new ways to make them less power. And to simplify is the hardest thing of all. Like we always kind of, so far we started by building things on iOS, and we realized that it was a horrible platform because it was so wasteful. But it was like built on top of like hundreds of layers of technologies. So we were like, okay, so let's go deeper. We started to build for mobile for browsers, because we thought platform independence was the best. So like we could build one app and run them on all the devices. But then we realized that developing for browser is not sustainable either, because to build something like Firefox or Chrome, you need a power whore, like a very strong computer. And we were like, okay, so we have to go deeper. So we started to build directly in C for like low level interface. And every time we go down the sort of pyramid of technologies, it gets increasingly harder. But also like we let go of a whole bunch of complexity and abstraction that was not needed. I find that there's a lot of like artificial complexities in this sort of stuff. So now we just want to keep being able to do what we do. So like audio visual arts, but on a leaner and leaner stack. So like right now, our focus is to build all the tools that we use daily, but at the assembly level. So that's like the first layer of technology above the hardware.
Okay, yeah. And in media design, we think a lot about the tools we use, and what would be your advice and like resources that students like us in media design could check out if we want to start making our own tools or be just more independent from the tech giants? Do you have any like resources? We know the Low Tech Lab, Low Tech Magazine, but do you have any other ones to recommend?
Well, first, I mean, it has to be sort of like, like how you wouldn't necessarily give up internet on your like just for fun, like people take detox or a retreat or a few days, like that doesn't really create a lasting effect on like the way you think or what you do. For tech, it's kind of like that too. So if you're interested in like kind of like getting rid of the tech giants a little bit, then you have to put yourself in a position where that's the only option that you have. So like one rule that you could set is like use an old, always used hardware. So like never buy a new laptop. Like the most sustainable hardware is the one that's already made. It's not like buying a Fairphone or like looking for like a super niche new hippie low power thing. No, it's like finding a ThinkPad from 15 years ago and making your best work on it. Finding ways to, I mean, these computers, even they're 15 years old, they're super powerful. You can run like really good illustration, music software on them. People were making drum and bass, on laptops 30 years ago. Or not laptops, but like Atari and these consoles. But
like the old Mac computers too, like the drawing software.
Yeah, like
were amazing.
I think like trying to go forward by knowing where things come from would be like a really good step. Like getting rid of all the Mac Apple products is really it's a really good step forward too. Like
Good start.
Yeah, well, Apple is going in the opposite direction where they're actively fighting against people being able to understand their hardware and software, and like building stuff on top of Apple just encourages them to build more closed source hardware, like the M1 laptop shit that they're releasing now. Like, while most of the capitalistic force seems to point that direction, like looking the other way, I think it would be like a good, interesting place to explore. And also, like in that space, there's so few people that there's not as much competition, I find. Like if you end up building things, tools and art on like these old platforms, then it's already a niche thing and it has a sort of like so much potential nowadays.
Yeah, okay. Cool. And one of the questions we wanted to ask you was like, do you think yourself as low-tech designers and developers, and what do you think also about the word low-tech itself? that we use a lot nowadays in this subject?
Well, right now I find it's kind of bordering on greenwashing a little bit. Like there's a lot of things that are calling themselves low tech, which are not low tech at all. And that kind of like rubs me. For somehow I'm a bit defensive with the word, even though we don't really use it ourselves so much.
Well, we use it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really more about resilience. Low tech has it's sort of like a pretty wide term that encompasses a bit of climate collapse, this sort of topics, and like environmental awareness, that sort of stuff. Well, for us, I think at the four most important thing is to be able to use it when everything else has broken down. Like if we don't have access to internet, if we don't have access to electricity, like we want to build a boat and a studio that allows us to keep going. Like recently we I mean, all the philosophy that we apply to technology and software, we also try to apply it in our own lives. So like we want the boat to be as resilient as possible. We want to be able to be surrounded by systems that we understand and we can take apart. And the sort of DRM protection stuff that we find in software also exists in hardware and also in like sailing equipment. And when your life depends on that sort of system, if you surround yourself with little intricate electronics things that you can't take apart and understand, then that creates a lot of liability for your own survival.
Yeah, it creates a dependence too. It's like you always have to stay close to some city center to make sure that you have, some way to fix it or to get somebody to fix it for you.
Yeah, if your water system relies on parts that come from China that has to be shipped from the US, and you're in an island in Fiji where you can't get mail, then you can't get water. But water is like you're surrounded by it, and if you don't have water catchment systems that work off the grid, offline, away from shipping lines, then it's really fragile. And so we see this pattern everywhere around us. So most of our research actually goes into like thinking about these sort of things beyond like making cool vector softwares.
Yeah, you started answering one of our next question, which was about like self-reliance and repair culture. So maybe Bea, you can continue.
Yeah. Actually, all together seems a lot, like taking care about the sailboat and all your habits. Like now I'm asking myself, how can you convey all this in one life? I mean, it's so much. So yeah, do you create new rituals, new habits? How do you deal with all these together?
Yeah, with taking care of a boat and also making video games and new softwares.
Oh, well, it's a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
It's a really steep learning curve, especially at first. I think it was like I think the first year when we got the boat, we weren't as productive as we would have liked. And I think it was, I mean, we still managed to do some things, but I think it took us a while for us to actually start to make things. Like when we left Canada, we were mostly just experimenting with little tiny projects.
I kind of want to say that we have actually slowed down. Maybe it doesn't feel that way.
No, I know it doesn't, but we have, I think, because we used to work a lot more.
Yeah, we used to work a lot more, doing a lot less, I find. Like, so.
But it's the projects, I think, have changed too. They're much smaller. Like it's just the turnaround time is much shorter than it used to be. Like for making, like Okoni took like a year to make. Now we could make a Donsol we did in
a month.
In a month or so.
So
right?
Like, I'm not sure how to phrase this properly, but like, there's two ways you can make a website. You can go the WordPress route where you learn about how WordPress works and all these intricate control configuration systems and all that kind of stuff, and you will spend years trying to understand how WordPress works. Or you could actually make yourself a website. Like, a website is just a text file with HTML markup inside. You can spend years learning the the intricacies of the technological stack that you believe that you need to make a website, or you can actually make the website. And for technology and games and all that kind of stuff, I find that we're doing a lot more now today. It's like we found a way to get rid of all the artificial abstractions, and now when we need to do something, we actually focus on the core problem. But doing that, I mean, there's no like cheat to get there. There's no like a book that you can read that'll get you there. It's like right now I'm reading Terre des Hommes by Saint-Exupéry, and he says like perfection is when you can't remove anything else. And everything in your life right now tells you that you need this new iPhone, you need this new thing to make coffee, you need this new thing to keep your food cold, but then you realize that wait, you don't need to we don't have a refrigerator on the boat, and we haven't felt the need for it in years, and we don't have tap water, and all these things you think you need that complexify everything and make everything more complicated. So you don't end up saving. Oh, hold on, my screensaver just sorry.
You're still online. We still hear you.
Yeah, but it was a matter of time until the Wi-Fi went asleep.
Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just like figuring out what we can remove kind of makes us more productive, I think, in a way. I don't want to say productive because it's kind of like not the word that I need, but it's
faster,
it's seemingly
maybe.
More efficient, maybe, or just
more efficient. Yeah.
Yes, and you were talking before about Apple and the fact that Apple is like a bad company, like because we cannot repair anything that is Apple. They made it so close, and you try to work with things that can be repaired and to create things that can be repaired and have a longevity. And we wanted to ask you, like, in your opinion, or how can we ourselves, reclaim our right to repair our own objects? Like, what is something we can do? Is it like just abandoning all those tools that cannot be repaired, or is there other ways? Like, I don't know.
Give us some
I mean,
hints.
it's a sort of tough question, because when you go the route of like, is it personal, like individual action, or like systemic changes that you want, it's a bit tricky, because you'll have people saying like, well, the masses will do this, and then if you say like systemic changes by passing law is the only way, then it's like a really slow way to react to a problem that we face right now. So but as I would say, as individual, it's like getting rid of everything that has a DRM on top. So like, if you play games, don't play games using Steam. If you use like online services, don't pay for Spotify. Buy the albums straight off. If you want to draw or whatever, never pay for Adobe crap. If you want to, like don't pay for these systems that you don't own. Like Apple is like, it's kind of an easy target, and also like I love to hate them, because it's not just at the software level. It's like they apply this philosophy to the hardware level. So you buy an iPhone now, you can never conceive of a time, you can never imagine a time when you'll be able to install Linux on it, or install another operating system on it, or like fix it up yourself. You know that in 5 years they will stop supporting it, and it will break down, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you basically bought a piece of trash that will exist in the future for thousands of years. So to get out of that is kind of like not to participate. The best thing to do in this case is not to participate at all in this.
And it doesn't mean getting rid of your devices necessarily, but just trying to find ways to keep using them.
It's just not buying anymore, like choosing to put our money into something more useful, or just buying something already used and not new, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like this sort of hardware, you're not buying, you're renting, and a lot of people don't see that. And there's some things that are fine to rent probably, but most of it, like in a environmentally conscious way, you don't want to have disposable electronics at all.
And
I mean, it's pretty difficult during these days, kind of avoid this subscription mode, because everyone is going into, and like economically big company, I can understand that they are going for them in the right way. So now, yeah, it's a big step that you did. It's a big decision. I really admire you. Yeah, I would love to just go away and go in a boat and living my life. So about this, like now I was wondering, like we as a city life person, we woke up and we kind of divide the private life to the working life, because we have two different environments. So, I mean, do you actually think that you're dividing still these two lives, or since you are in the boat and you live in the boat, you work in the boat, is everything together?
I think it's together. Yeah.
See.
It's never been separate, I think, for
okay.
since we've been on the boat anyway.
Okay, I also heard that you make turns for sleeping. Is that true?
Oh, you mean at sea?
Yeah.
at sea.
Yeah, in the sea. Yeah.
Yeah, like when you're doing long transit, you never sleep more than
3 hours at a time.
3 hours at a time. Yeah.
Must be so tough.
But it's not that bad. You get used to it. If you don't sleep, then it gets a bit shitty. But
Yeah,
because then you just get tired the next for the 3 hours that you do have to stay awake. But then you listen to happy hardcore and it helps. So I don't know.
yes. And now, extra question. I was wondering, why did you choose Japan? Is it the culture that inspired you, like the wabi-sabi, the fact that they actually repair? They have this culture of repairing, or something else beyond this?
It's food.
Food. Oh wow, then yeah, everything is clear.
Yeah, I mean, we were for a while. I mean, we lived in Japan for 2 years, and I think we weren't as much into cooking as we are now. And there's just so many really intricate ingredients that come from there, and also like we only eat plants, and I mean, Japan has a very good the Buddhist style of Buddhist cooking. I mean, all the good like vegan type foods are there basically. All the good fresh ingredients like tofu. And,
They've invented tofu, probably.
well, yeah, maybe, yeah, who knows? But they have just so many options for us. Maybe not to eat out, but to cook with, and just to, I don't know. They have just a lot of really nice ingredients, and we were looking forward to go there and actually experience more of the countryside of Japan, because when we lived there, we lived in the city, and that's really, really different. And biking in the country in Japan, it's so nice. It's like one of our favorite things to do.
I can imagine. Yeah, I'm kind of envious about this. You're inspiring me a lot.
Yeah, just wanted to say that for people watching, you can ask questions also in the Q&A, and we will see them.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I had one other like technical questions first. It was because of living on the boat, it's like not we are used to having like power all the time, like unlimited supposedly, and you do have to find alternatives way to have power, install power. And do you have any advice on how, for a city life student or designer, or could we be more aware of the energy usage we have when we create projects? Because here it just seems unlimited, but actually it's not. It's actually real energy. And do you have any idea of a way to be more aware of it when it never stops? Because you have the sun that kind of dictates the power you will have to work, but how is there other tools we can use to know how much we're using?
It's kind of it's a tricky question, because if you want to preserve what you have without letting go of anything, then there's no sustainable way to do that. You know, before I was saying like how the safest way to travel is to follow the weather. Well, I mean, the healthiest way to work is also to follow the weather. Like when we're at sea or when we're at anchor and the sun sets, we just stop working. But telling that to someone who live in the city is kind of like a pretty weird thing. Like, well, why would I, like, what, I mean, I remember last time when we went to Montreal, I was telling my friend like, oh yeah, like we don't have Netflix at sea. And she was like, but what do you do? Like, and
You mean you have to sit with your thoughts?
yeah, like when you're at sea, you look around around the boat, and there's enough distraction between the birds and the waves and the moon or whatever that you don't need Netflix. But in the city, you don't have access to that. There's not a place, like, all nature has been pushed away so far that it's just like you visit nature by taking your car to going to a zoo or something artificial. So you need distractions like Netflix and that sort of stuff. So there's no way, I think, that you can actually like live in a city and also apply these concepts.
There is François in the Q&A that is asking, does your social, because of the internet connection that can be on and off, and sometimes you can go a lot of time without it, does your social life is impacted by living on the boat? I mean, I guess.
Of course.
Well, I mean, with people that are far away, like our friends and stuff, sure, I guess. But I guess we also meet people on other boats and, you know, have developed relationships with those people.
Yeah, it's different. I think like we see people less often, but I find we have like richer moments. Also like nowadays, all our social life is with people who are like 60 years old and up, because there's not many people our age on sailboats. But I think it has impacted our life, but I wouldn't say for the worse.
Maybe it's more rich because, like us in the city, we go to work and we go home and we just see the people we're used to. But maybe you get to meet actually more people and have a better social life, more interesting anyway.
Maybe more of a variety of people who probably would not interact with usually. Like,
yeah, maybe less small talk.
Nice.
Yeah, it depends on where you. Yeah, I mean, sorry.
We have 3 minutes left. So
yeah, we have 3 minutes left. We thank you so much, and
we have a new question.
Oh, I can see.
So yeah, from E.T. How would you live if you did not have a sailboat? That's actually one of the questions we wanted to ask. Like, could you imagine running an experiment like you are doing in Pinot, but on land? Like in ET is saying, like a cabin in the wood or a van.
Well, a van has its problem where you rely heavily on fossil fuel to get around. So in that sense, it's really not resilient.
Mm-hmm.
A cabin is resilient, except you can't follow the weather. You're like you have to face whatever comes, and I find that's even harder.
But it's also much more expensive. I think that's more out of our reach than a boat was, just because it's like land, and a cabin probably in a space like that would not be cheap.
Yeah, you'll go cut down trees to install a cabin so you can be off grid.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's really the way.
I don't know. Maybe we would have been more nomadic than we are now. I mean,
maybe a bicycle
around.
Yeah, a bicycle in a tent would be like more akin to it, but then we don't know how to simplify our lives further yet.
Okay, well, maybe last question. You talked about food in Japan especially, and you have a lot of recipe. You talk a lot about food on your website, and you have this website that is called Green Grains also. So to end this talk, maybe you could recommend a recipe we should all try, because it's almost dinner time here in Geneva. So what do you recommend we should try, the best one you put on there?
Oh, best one, I think depends, but
one of the best.
A good recipe is the sweet and sour lentils it's pretty fun. It's just easy to like, and I haven't met anybody yet that hasn't really liked it. So if you're not allergic to peanuts anyway, a good
No.
recipe.
Okay, well,
Thank you so much. So you're the existing proof that graphic and animation can be performed all over the world. And yeah, during this pandemic, I think you're a big inspiration for a lot of people. So we thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks.